New Jersey. I mean, like went to NJIT. Someone in Apple. Richard's in Ann Arbor, I think. Is that where he is? Is that Cody? Is that where Richard is? Ann Arbor?
No, it's like Harrison Township.
Oh, yeah. And then Fodger is from Ann Arbor.
Did we try something? I tried, but it was reading here. Yeah, we'll try.
So Jason, you said you're still in school for, what are you doing? Teaching. Okay. When you said you're still in school over the summer, I was like, is he doing something? What are you doing?
Just got a small in-house research grant from the university, start to do my own research.
Okay, cool.
So probably I'll spend the whole summer for that and for the next semester classes.
Okay. Do you teach full time?
Yes.
Okay.
I've never seen that before. Yeah.
The agreement?
Yeah.
I think it's only an hour.
I'm always the one.
He gives it to me every time I join in.
It's like,
Sell my soul to join the Google Hangout.
that's weird.
I know. I don't know what it says.
Nobody else.
Where are
You
all
see
the
that one
ladies?
user agreement?
Yeah.
Do you have one woman in the back?
I think we have Nora
Someone got
and we
like
have
100,000 people signed
Caitlin.
for a nonprofit by putting that in user agreement.
That's one's upstairs. It just.
Yeah, in fact, this studio, this particular studio has the fewest for me in a long time.
Sorry?
Is your
For all of my exams this week, it will be
Is that somewhere in the feedback?
my first one, I think. Yeah. I have 2 exams and then finals for like creative writing.
Mark, so how's construction going on the other project?
See,
Well, your project.
it's her project. The Wayne State project is her project.
It's
That's
going well.
that's flying.
Yeah, it's the first phase of the building is going to open for the fall semester. So students will move in August. So
Oh,
it's
I meant-
very fast.
I meant the site that we have the project.
Oh, that is flying. You know, I
I'm like, I don't know what you're
think
talking about.
I think they're running mechanicals
For
and
what?
A3 for this
Oh.
particular site. Well, I need to ask Christoph that. I haven't
I
been
think
there
it's
in a while,
enclosed.
but I'm not sure how far along they are.
Do you guys do those overhead aerial like drone footage?
No, we hire somebody.
Do you hire? Yeah.
Sometimes the contractor will set up like a construction cam off of an adjacent building or something. But I don't know if they have one over there.
Yeah, I just came across this on YouTube one day. Jesus Christ, it's crazy.
Every time you mute it, it's fine. I am muted. I literally.
Are you guys going first?
Last.
Oh.
Yeah, go first. You can switch it up. What do you think? Sometimes it's nice going first. Just kind of get through it. You don't have to sit with your nerves for 2 hours waiting.
You definitely want to be first when you're presenting at City Hall, because you could be in some
4 hours.
meeting, some case that just gets deep into the weeds, way too deep, way unnecessarily.
But maybe if you have to wait longer, some of the people that will be asking questions on the
They do, and then the staff gets, the board gets tired and impatient.
pass. We don't even need to hear it.
Yeah,
Pass.
they get hostile.
Cranky. Oh, they get
Yeah, because they wanted to be home watching Wheel of Fortune.
Oh, Toronto game's on tonight.
That's right.
Oh my goodness. Do we get that like picture in picture?
Toronto game's
Stream it. Hey, Desmond. Hmm?
Where are you all on Oh.
It's like the Last Supper here. Smart.
Jesus.
Good guess.
Mark, so you just spent Saturday at Cranbrook? Was it Saturday or Sunday?
Both. I went back
Oh.
because I couldn't see everything because there were so many people, and I was treated to a performance. Then so that worked out nicely.
I appreciated the tour by Instagram.
Yeah, there was some good stuff.
So that was.
Did you know Georgie? Are you aware of him? Do you know him? He graduated 2 years ago.
I know a little bit about it. So he went there, right?
He did. He graduated 4 years ago here, but hi Dan. But
We need another chair.
we can scooch another chair in.
Yeah.
Did you get a break at all?
Yeah, like 5 minutes.
Oh dear.
Do you want me to bring some coffee?
He's good. Dan Farrow, this is Caitlin Hill, one of the architects in our office.
Good to meet you.
Caitlin, this is Dan.
When my car just like starts to repair, like, oh my God. I think we'll go see God.
And then Becky Nix had a piece there, and she graduated at UDM several years ago, like Wes and Chris Rohn's class and all of that. But she went into like 2D design at Cranbrook, so she returned to school 2 years ago. So she had a piece there too. And then another person that I know is there, and she was in industrial design. So I got to see 3 things out of the 2 dozen students, right? Okay. All right, so let's get started. Good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me? Thumbs up from the people out of town. Excellent, thank you. Tonight is the beginning of two evenings here at the College of Architecture and Design for the Comprehensive Design Studio for the spring semester. We will see presentations tonight by 4 teams, starting with Alec and Trevor, as I recall. Is that correct? Okay. And each of you to present and unpack your, wow, welcome back. Let me shake his hand. I haven't met him yet. Thanks for coming in. I appreciate it. All the way from New Haven, Connecticut.
Awesome.
So tonight we will have 10 minutes to present, and then we will have about 20 minutes to have conversations with the team members about their work and about their maybe process and their conclusions. And to engage in that process, we have, of course, our lab professor, Dan Farrow, with us tonight. He is to my left. To my immediate left is Caitlin Hill, an architect in our office. There's Caitlin. And you will remember her from Benchmark-2, I think. I think you were here for one.
I was here. I don't remember. I was here last semester, I think.
I know that, but I think you were here earlier. In any event, Caitlin is familiar with this project and working in the online environment like we are here. And Jason Young, one of the full-time faculty members here to my immediate right. This is we need a widescreen camera on these things, don't we? Just like dial that in. So thank you all for coming in tonight for these reviews, and thank you to the students who drove in or flew in to be here. That means a lot. I think you'll enjoy that, this process. So Alec and Trevor, if you all are ready, do I have to turn the volume down on mine? I forget how this works again.
If you mute yourself, then I'll unmute me.
Yeah, just
Or
any comments you make.
Trevor,
Yeah.
take over the mic. But once you go to comments, switch it back so I can hear the jurors.
It might be easier to see the screen if these are off. Is that okay?
Really? So this team is Alec and Trevor. And I'm ready when you are.
I'm just making sure everybody's able to hear or comments also.
I can hear you. I was able
one more minute and make sure that we're missing Nora. Who else are we missing? Thirteen.
Hung was in class today.
We're gonna shop here.
I don't think that's there. She is. Okay, so I see Nora. So I guess we'll get going.
Good to go? Okay. All right. So we started off with one of the rendering down along John R. Street south toward Detroit, just to generate a little bit of excitement at the beginning. This was a contextual around the site. Some big attractors. We saw CA, Comerica Park, and then Ford Field. So we wanted to consider the site context when we were thinking about what could influence our design process.
On a smaller scale, closer to our site, we used vectors to create the mass of our structure. So starting in the top left, that is the blue line is our lot line. That's the boundaries of our lot. And then the yellow arrows are the mandatory setbacks. Then we took vectors, these magenta vectors from the surfaces of the neighboring buildings to inform the street facade. Moving on from there, we did we noted that something really important was that intersection and the buildings neighboring us across the street. In kitty corner, we have the Ransom Gillis house just across the street. So we wanted to give priority to that. In the bottom right corner, you see the final outline of the building that we came up with. These are some preliminary cladding plans. We wanted to keep the cladding pretty constant throughout, so we're using a metal panel, but we wanted to take the opportunity to orient the metal panels and change the color of metal panels to give a different texture to different pieces of the building. The direction and color are all organized based on the programming on the inside, and then some vertical opportunities with the balconies on the facade.
You can keep going. This is our selection was inspired by the Ransom Gillis house, and this carried the very first module in the historic research that we did. So the design elements of the already exists in the neighborhood to transcend into our project ultimately drove our material selection. This is our site plan, which is the courtyard later on in the process. So this is one of the documents that is reflective of the courtyard design of the courtyard. We can keep moving. The parking plan underground, we got all 50 space compact stalls at 6C and the handicap stalls close to the elevator, VW and 03 and 04. This is looking into the lobby sprints.
So this is the ground floor plan. The lobby that we were looking at exists here on on Alfred Street. And we prioritize retail to occupy the corner of John R. and Alfred, and to run along John R., which is the more busy street of the two. All the back of house spaces exist towards the alley of the south and the center of our lot to keep it away from those major streets. The only thing that runs out to is closest to the street, which is bicycle storage on Alfred Street, which is given a window to the outside, so you can see as you're walking by, you see the bike storage indoors. These are the residential floor plans. I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, but what I like you to pay attention to is how we organize our community spaces. So in the top right corner, we have an indoor community room on this second floor. Moving up to the third floor, we have an outdoor community terrace in that same spot. These two places prioritize the Ransom Gillis house as a viewpoint, as comparison to our structure. Up to the third floor, that place becomes a unit. So that corner unit becomes very wanted by any buyer. So it would be a higher priced unit. And the community space moves to this corner of the building, which prioritizes the view of downtown Detroit. Because of the placement of the buildings to our south, the view from this building gives a great view of the skyline. And one more floor up, there's a full terrace that is the same.
Right.
Then
I'll chime in as you page through the next couple. Eddie mentioned a lot. That's another aspect of our project that ran to the final presentation from our Module 1 research, and that Mayor Duggan's emphasis on one everybody. So that's another transcending element into our final.
This is just a roof plan showing the drainage and the soil vent stacks at the top. Details are coming later in the project. Then we have the some sections through our building showing parking and how the different floors come together.
We have the stair sections to show the coordination between floor-to-floor heights, and then that we were at least thinking about what the handrails and guardrails need to be at, and the risers and tread depth. And then just elevations that are pretty solid. Show our fenestration intent. This is a rendering looking to the east, and you can see the Ransom Gillis house there. Point to that community space diagonal from mentioning in the program.
And then you can also see the other community space terrace in the back facing the courtyard in downtown.
Silhouettes waving to you. We have our wall side elevation that we're about to show details for. So we're looking at the curb portion of the wall. It may be over-designed a little bit because of the continuous insulation, but we switched from earlier to XPS rather than insulation material just because it had the, you can see we're looking at the R values from the Studio Companion. I pretty much just picked the highest R value since we weren't into the economy of it. A good recommendation to go with. And then, I don't know if you can see from back here, but the barrier in blue, air barrier in gray, and orange through all of these below details. Would want to note on this one that a change from earlier, the composite panels on the exterior, and about the gray strips along, and that's just an honesty about where the floor changed from one to another. So we're a special gray composite panel that runs along those that elevation, and then this is the subgrade condition.
The retaining wall has a drop cap to help support that beam.
Mm-hmm. Plan. I won't go into much detail because most of the notes on there say what I would say about it. This is the underground structural framing plan for the parking floor. This is the ground floor. Cores grade in. And then I'd note the rigid bay location, upper right-hand corner diagrams. We wanted to try and balance it between side and on the street side of the building, and then the north and south sides, parts of the L. These are for the steel floors, which are the typical upper uppers. And then the next will show you the steel encased in concrete. These are for the parking floors, so that we could have continuous subgrade all the way up to the top floor.
This is a plumbing section diagram. It lays out the vertical planning of plumbing between the units, because the units along John R. do not stack perfectly because of the way we organize them. So this just lays out the system on how the waste goes out to the main sewer, and how the stacks are vented, and how any gray water or rainwater is stored and then returned to the system. Moving on to these are the ground floor systems. So from left to right, we have the fire suppression, HVAC, and lighting. The fire suppression, there are two main fire suppression sprinklers systems that separates the retail space from the residential space over here. So this system has access to the outside right here along John R. And then the main system for the residential building has access to here on the back side of Alfred Street. And then again, there's a separation between, for the HVAC, between the retail spaces here and the residential spaces here. We're using a VRF system to keep the heat and cool the spaces. Moving up to a residential floor. This is a pretty typical residential floor, the common spaces. The sprinklers are, again, they're vertically run through this section near Alfred, and they go through the main corridor and into the units. We'll get into the units, how they're laid out later. As for HVAC, vertical ducts run through this central core next to the elevators from the roof, where the central DOAS and VRF systems will be located for those common area spaces. This is our code compliance. We did a bunch of different iterations on ComCheck, but unfortunately we couldn't get it. I don't know, I kept entering the wrong numbers, and I was having an issue with the system that like we got rid of Windows, who made it a solid block, and it still failed. So I couldn't figure out why it was changing. So that's a learning block for us. Here's a unit layout. We have 7 different types of units. Up in the top left-hand corner, you'll see where in the plan they lay out. So the dark magenta is this unit, and then the light magenta is the mirrored unit. So any other unit that's the same is going to be in the lighter color. So we got our floor plan. The entry doors are ADA accessible. We have the fire suppression coming in from the corridor. And for HVAC, each unit has its own system. The VRF unit is located along the balcony to bring in air, bring in that fresh air. And then the VRF, the refrigerant pipes, lead to the cassettes in the ceiling that will take in that air and then treat it and put it back out into the system, along with the ERV from and exhaust from the room.
Alec, do you want to just page quickly through the last portion, since
yeah,
the considerations for the units, really just all that changes is the layout of the
rendering of one of the inside the units. Another.
It's the same strategy was implemented for all these typical units, but we just had a lot of different conditions. And this is a double unit rendering.
This is our ADA unit. Make sure all the spaces for turning around, all the doors are ADA accessible. The restroom has the right sizes and everything, as well as a similar system. And this is our money shot from the balcony behind that terrace. We get a view of downtown. So this would be the green bar, the railing, and then you get a nice look at Rensen and the skyline.
Mm-hmm.
Come on. So I'm gonna.
Mike, so that Caitlin and Jason can speak.
I'll let you go first.
No, you guys go ahead.
You go first. Yeah, I still
you-
need.
So, I guess for me, one of the most interesting slides sort of came at the beginning. The exterior skin alterations page. Something struck me about how those were rendered and sort of the texture of the facade. Keep going back. Yeah, this one. I don't know what is exactly going on, but the kind of graininess of the renderings and sort of texture of what maybe it's the way they're being rendered is really quite interesting. And there's a lot of sort of texture and pattern happening that kind of starts to get lost. You really quickly kind of flipped through the Revit elevations. I don't know if they're doing Revit, but like the building elevations where I think maybe some of this could have been explored a little bit. I mean, I think the sketched rendering style is interesting, but to me, it's a little bit more diagrammatic. So I guess I would have been interested in seeing you explore maybe the evolution of these drawings as architectural drawings rather than what kind of seemed like color blocking. I think the window patterning is interesting. I just think it could have been explored much more in a similar way to, you know, how you represented the sketches even. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing, I understand the idea of color, but I wasn't quite sure what the materiality of the building is. Like, what is the yellow?
What is, you're saying,
You
what
said
does it represent?
So it's all metal panel?
Yes, it's
Okay.
all from the same manufacturer in Detroit, actually.
Okay. I mean, I think another way to explore sort of maybe that idea of using the Gillis house as inspiration could have been to not just explore the colors, but also the textures of different materials. I think you would find that if this were a real project, you know, going to the Historic Commission and talking about an entirely metal-clad building might be sort of challenging. Not that you couldn't make the case, but I also think there's functional reasons to maybe show the building with some sort of masonry base material that stands up to salt and weather and durability. So I guess I just wish that these elevations had been explored a little bit more in a, not just a technical way, but also an artistic way to represent your ideas.
Can you go back to the HVAC system? There was a floor plan. Yep, this one. This one is pretty clear, but the before, one slide before. Okay. So on the right side is a commercial area, and the left side was residential.
Yeah, this is the retail space here. And then this is all the residential lot.
Yeah, this is all the residential lot. It was all empty.
It's all empty. What is that space?
Alec, they're asking what the, on the left side of the wall, on the lower portion is.
Above the stairs.
Here?
Yeah, right there. What's that?
Oh, that's open to outside. There's no space. That's not interior space. Above this level is the units, the residences.
Oh.
So because it's a reflected ceiling plan, it's showing up on the.
What happens in that space? What is it used for?
Right now, it's an unconditioned corridor to the backup house. It's just not an enclosed space.
I'm just asking.
And it has the van access to the retail spaces, so they would park over here and then move whatever they need into their retail through that space.
I just got a little confused about the spaces, and also I think it's a little better to understand if you mark like kind of where the mechanical system started from, or maybe from the basement or something. Right now, I understand that you separated it for the commercial area and residential, so different zones. So maybe if you make it like with different color coded by the zoning.
Okay.
Just a way of presentation.
So I'll just chime in on a few points and stop. I guess the first question I have is on column line 5. It looks like there's no columns in the parking level, but there's that whole load transfer issue of that wall that has to be addressed. How are we going to handle that?
So our proposal was to use the drop cap, even though it is it's not on the column line, but that was our solution to fit parking up against that wall. Otherwise, we'd have columns running through 4 or 5 of those spaces. So we were hoping that the drop cap would suffice as the load transfer to the retaining wall from the columns above.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's going to carry 5 stories of construction above. You're showing again. I mean, also when you go to parking, you go to your parking. I mean, if you're going to show that in more detail, because right now I don't see how that will work. I mean, stop. Go back to that section. Building section. Show the wall section. Sorry, the wall section.
Just skipped it again.
There's a wall section right
There you
there.
go,
There you go. Do you see what I'm getting at?
Yes.
All of this comes on that, and there's no transfer mechanism that I can. That's my point. If you go to your parking level, you might be able to drop the columns in, but you're going to have to shuffle. You're going to have to reshuffle your parking spaces. Right. So that would be. I mean, I think we talked about that at the last review, right? So that would be my point to sort of bring that to the resolution, because I don't think this is going to work.
Okay. It's too far. I know there's a degree to which you can make it eccentric.
I'm just saying there's a 5-story concentrated load right there.
So it's too.
I don't know that that's going to work. You know, and then I was trying to understand that steel. I guess now I understood you have steel in the lower level, and then that's a composite system that goes up. You know, I was curious why you didn't use the inverted beam solution, which would have reduced your floor-to-floor height. I know that was one of the options that we gave you. So I think you have to deal with the beam, and of course, below the floor and all the clearance issues. Yeah. So the inverted beam solution would have been more like the delta beam that Professor Farlow talked about. I would have suggested that as an alternate. In terms of HVAC, I think that, I'll be honest with Alec, I think you had a better developed solution to the HVAC and some drawings I saw earlier this semester with more notes and annotations. I'm surprised that it's not showing up here. Supply and return in some spaces are indistinguished. They almost look like they're occupying the same space at the same level. In some cases, there's just not enough emitters in some of the retail and ground floor levels. You need more of them. Fire suppression is not shown in the bedrooms of a typical unit. There seems to be a lot of lighting fixtures shown in some spaces, which I really don't think that density is needed. You could probably get by with half that at least to make that. I'm not exactly sure what that was for. The only quick comment on the architecture would be you started with those regulating lines at the very beginning, and then there was kind of like that carriage house that was behind the main historic house there. I just don't know how that's relevant to the facade along the street and how that ever carried through. It's not a reference that I would have been thinking about. I would have been thinking about references that are maybe starting from the street and inform the elevation along the street. In terms of material choices, I wondered about maybe similar comments earlier, but the light yellow is actually the very thin band which the building across from you uses, but you used it as a larger mass. I just wondered, like, maybe that thin yellow band could have been the little gray strips you put in the floor, because that would have been an accent, and whether the gray, which I'm not really sure, I guess it shows up here, but it could be gray within the stair towers or something. So that's it for me. I'm sorry.
So we have a few minutes left. I gave you some extra time. Well, you took extra time. Let me say it that way. You took extra time to make your presentation, and we have a few moments left. And in those closing remarks, I think a lot of the things that you're hearing tonight are things that you should take to heart. You should amend your package. You should amend your drawings and the slide deck demonstrate that you've solved or eradicated those concerns. Because at the end of it all, I really want to encourage you guys to have a package that is accurate, right? And that it has a degree of sort of thoughtfulness and comprehensiveness that this studio expects. So those items are not pesky gnats. They are details that need to be solved, and I want to encourage you to do that very, very quickly, right? Like in the next day or so that the package as it leaves this program is sort of at the highest level. That's the first thing. The second thing is you guys, I think, were a pretty good team that solved this problem in a very special, if not unique way. You tried to understand how the corner of this building could relate and react to another important corner building in the Ransom Gillis house. And your solution was this sort of interplay between program on one floor and residential program on another floor above that or below that. And I thought that stitching of those ideas, that sort of interlacing of program with residential, was a very interesting solution. It produced a somewhat innovative response to the corner by, in a way, deconstructing the corner. So I think that was actually a pretty interesting notion. It's what you chose to render, and it's what you chose to sort of focus on for the package. And you know what? In a project like this that has so many kind of chainsaws in the air, and that you're kind of asked to juggle, it might have been better to really just focus on that and not all of these other things. One of the things that we learned early on in the semester listening to Beth Whitaker was talking about the core project, and that might have been the core project, and letting the core project meander or find its way into other things like the patterns in the skin. I think you guys have good instincts in keeping the curtain wall straightforward by keeping it uniform and keeping it consistent to reduce the trades, but it's not exactly clear how that's executed and how that is executed in terms of that corner, for example. So I think that's something I would have wanted you to look at more clearly. I also feel like these drawings are peculiar and quirky and unusual, and I'm on board with that. I don't dissuade you all from doing drawings like this, but I also think that there may be some necessity over the next few weeks, like this summer, for you to take this design into a more conventional rendering software, and amending the package to include the straight up architectural renderings, of which we can talk about a number of different ways that you could approach that. But I think the package deserves that as well. And there's no sort of shortage looking at arcdaily.com or Dezeen.com of what's happening in the profession. But I think your set certainly deserves that.
One last comment I forgot. It looks like you have some very large planters sitting on that grade level above the parking. Yeah, that's probably going to put a huge load on top of the structure for the parking. I would suggest you really cut back on that. Okay. Also, if it were me, I would be thinking about how I'm going to vent parking, right? Ventilation. So maybe introduce some ventilation ports in that parking, but certainly bring those down. I mean, maybe it could have grass or plant materials, but not, I don't think, to the extent you show.
Yeah, I mean, if they were not planters at all, but kind of like portals or chimneys, right, that led to the lower level that you could look down into, that would provide ambient ventilation from below to the ground plane. So that's definitely an option. Yeah.
Could I also make one small suggestion? It looked like just in your presentation that all the plans were sort of cockeyed like a degree. And it was really distracting for me. I think if you're going to amend this package, it should include orthogonal plans. Thank you. And even if, like, basically the bottom of the plan should be flat, and then if you have an angle, maybe it goes. I don't know if there is an angle here though, so I couldn't tell what was going on. And also, like, a lot of the plan graphics had kind of like Revit graphic hatch patterns in them that didn't seem to correspond to what you were trying to show in that particular drawing. I also thought the lighting was pretty odd. I wouldn't recommend wall sconces on like residential. For the residential lighting, it wants to be more flexible, I think. So if you were re-looking at lighting with the previous comments, I would take another look at the units as well.
You know what, I actually really, I think that comment about straightening the floor plans and really the unit plans is spot on, because when you crank a composition like this, it activates the borders and it makes the overall thing in a way more important. It's harder, for example, when you're showing 3 different strategies like lighting, HVAC, and fire suppression. It's really hard for us to see those connections, the way these things relate to one another or how they could relate when all of the plans are rotated by 17.8 degrees, right? So I think the idea, right, of justifying everything true to the sheet is really useful. I would do that in CAD or Revit anyways. I would just, because it's maddening to work in a drawing that has, you know, a true north as the datum for everything. It's just really hard to understand the way things stack, the way things align, and it makes it harder for us to do that.
More small comment about the parking lot plan.
Alex, did you catch
Parking?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. If you're going to respond to Dan's comments so that rearrange the columns, then maybe there's a way you can fix those entrances. I mean, if you, like, I was thinking I drive down to the parking lot and then there's like a really, like, this pinned corner and I have to go in. So I was wondering maybe that you can fix that way. I don't know if that's a wall or just a mark.
Could we just go this way?
You know, maybe like there could be other way. I mean, that really bothered me.
Oh,
that
I know.
pinned corner.
That's like crank the wheel to the right.
Yeah. So
Hard.
there could be another way that you can.
Yeah, how am I supposed to be texting and drinking my coffee and putting on my makeup,
I know it's
getting ready for my evening date and make that turn, right?
It's a labyrinth, but it follows the code that what you're referencing. Reservados. It's tough to squeeze 50 parking spots underground.
But
I know, I can see that you're really trying hard to squeeze all those.
There were a lot of comments
spots,
earlier in the
but,
semester
yeah.
that
I mean, with the exception of these bays, everything is 90 degrees. So I would just suggest my quick solution would be to go this way.
But then what happens when the cars cross? Because you drive on the right side of the 2-way entry exit point, but then it switches to 1-way. And you would have cars at an intersection.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You've got a cross.
That was definitely a thought in my process. This is a compromise solution to try and fit 50.
But you don't have any visual obstruction in here. My point is you can see who's coming down.
Okay.
I mean, I have to agree, this is a real hard right turn to make that when it first comes.
And most of us are distracted drivers today, right? I don't think I ever see anybody driving with 2 hands on the wheel anymore.
I mean, look at this. You know, you're not far off. I mean, this column won't interfere with that space now too much. The back door may not open that well. Same thing here. I have a problem with the back door, but you only got really 2 or 3 to fix, right? So maybe by reshuffling the deck of what's a compact, non-compact, and handicap, you can get them to line up, right?
That's a fair criticism. I think by no means do we think this is a perfect solution to parking. It was just at a point where we wanted to try and address as many other areas as we could at that point of the.
Okay. Thank you very much, Alec. Thank you, Trevor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Let's move on to the next group. Who is the next group?
Somebody needs to turn on their microphone.
On screen share.
Well, I bet they're all having fun without us.
No, I'm here.
Oh, okay, there we are.
Oh dear, I can hear myself up there.
Somebody, mute your computer. I think that will go away. Mine's muted. Is the audio on yours?
Yeah, this is muted.
Muted now.
Okay.
I muted in.
Yeah.
I felt like I was using Nathan now, so now.
Okay, so I'm Casey.
I'm Caitlin.
So we'll start off table of contents. Give me a second to look at that before I move on. With our design process, and the left set of diagrams takes the site and breaks it down into the site setbacks, which is and then and also the garage entrance, and then outdoor space. So that's what the green box is for. And then on the bottom left diagram, I synthesized those all into one, and that black what ended up being like of what we wanted our floor footprint to be. So then we took that floor footprint and I used Andrew Marsh to figure out when the facades were coming in contact with the suns are for the 4 solstices and equinoxes that facades the sun. So if you notice top right, which is the east facade, we did a series of setbacks at each unit to try to emphasize verticality on John R. And the next set of design process drawings we did was laying out program. So the blue mechanical spaces we knew we wanted to have, which lies closer to the, so it's not directly on John R, and also clearly so it can be serviced. Floors are the residential spaces, and then it also shows horizontal and vertical circulation. Then we'll move in, and here you can see that outdoor space. We provided outdoor seating and plant usage. So garage floor, and we also fit all of our fit airs. This is 30 school spaces, 6 handicap, and 7 which are the handicap spaces are located nearest to the elevator. The compact car spaces are southernmost edge along the eastern and western walls, those 6 spaces. Then this is the ground floor plan and their corresponding load calculations. The west side of the wing that has the mostly maintenance and mechanical spaces on the west side street facade, and then there's retail on the John R side.
So I'll go through the typical room layout, bedroom, and studio. And this is for the typical of the 2-bedroom layout. So moving into the floor, to keep the amenities in our building to allow all of the units to have the best spaces along the facade.
And then we switched floor to floor with the room and gym. And then moving on to show just the ability of the rooms.
And then we did some life safety diagrams. So the larger of the three ground floor plan, and then the red lines are representative of primary exit paths, secondary, and then the dotted lines around the corridors are 3-hour separations. And then we'll move into the elevations. So the east and west facades, as you can, alternated between tactile panels and metal panels to accentuate the verticality on the John R. facade. North and south elevations.
And this is our partial and full building section. Show a little bit more detail into the technical work. And this is a little bit of information on the systems. And then some detail section showing our mid-wall parapet and foundation, and how that system all works.
To structure, we had a type 2-A protected non-combustible building, which meant we had the podium for the garage floor, and then steel the residential floors. So I looked at road conditions, and the max height was 85 feet. We complied at 53.5. We complied with the max at 5 each for proposed and max. Allowable area was 100, and we had 10,000 per floor at 40,000. And then those are some quick details of how the bolted. And then on the diagrams, the red simulates the shear walls, which we place in the corridors because the corridors stay in through all 5 floors. So then this is the garage and ground level plan.
So for HVAC system, we went with a DOAS and VAV box terminals, showing the floor plan for it for the level 1 retail areas. And then this is a diagram which is needed for the HVAC. And then for the appointment units, we went with the Magic Pack of the plaza along the exterior facade. And this is to show the ceiling plan for the first level with the sprinkler layout and lighting. And then this is a typical.
And then I looked at to be considered photovoltaic energy savings. So I used analysis tool in Revit and also Insight to calculate how much kilowatts per year PV panels could produce structure, which came out to be 1,000 kilowatts per hour, and then that $35,000 per year. And then the bottom 4 diagrams are the proposed on the left, which has 74.4 per hour, per hour, or kBTUs per feet squared per year. And then adding PV panels reduces it to 30, which was a 42% saving. And then it starts off at $1.33 US dollars per feet squared per year, and then reduces by adding PV panels, which is a 45% savings. Thank you. Hmm?
When you talked about the unit design, but what's the power source for heating and air conditioning to the common spaces?
For the
What you described, moderating of air and the fresh air supply, UOS and AC, right? But what tempers? What's your power source to that? You have a boiler. What is the boiler? Remember what you specified or?
I do not.
Okay. And then you have air conditioning, right? So would that be a traditional AC unit with a compressor, condenser, and all that? Okay.
Can you quickly explain? I think I skipped that part, like when you design the whole mass with solar radiation.
Oh, just
yeah.
What is that telling you? It's sort of my question. What did that, and how did that inform your decisions?
the sun.
Right. What did you do and what did you learn from it? Because I kind of missed that.
Well, one of the things we did was the setbacks on the eastern facade, which we kind of took as, if you look at the times, that's really early morning. So we were trying to provide some sort of shading for the units by setting them back as they progress so that they don't get that direct sunlight in the morning.
And why did the bioclimatic information that we had for the class tell us to do that? Or did it? Or was it a visual issue that you wanted to respond to?
What do you?
Okay, so bioclimatic charts, that work that we did at the very beginning said that there are certain strategies that make sense. One of them would be, let's say, shading when there are overheating conditions throughout the year. East-facing facade is typically benign. I never have to worry about overheating because the sun, as it kind of moves throughout the day, it's usually away from the east and moving towards south. So if you did that to shelter the spaces or the windows from the standpoint of overheating, it's not really effective. If you did it for a visual reason, like you liked a shadow line, is that why you did it?
Yeah,
okay.
That was more so that we had those spaces on the east facade that accentuated the verticality, and then also because it's only activated in the early mornings, we didn't want, as you can see in the summer solstice, it hits it at 3:55 a.m. is when the sun rises, and so we were trying to set them back so that they got a little bit of shade. Yeah, that's what. That's when it begins to rise. Yeah, for the summer solstice.
Okay. And can you go back to the HVAC before the common area?
You want
yeah, that one. Yeah, I thought there's some terminal units are missing on the top part corridor. The supply unit. I can see the return unit on the top corridor, but supply unit is only one at the end, like each end.
If this gets subdivided into smaller tenant space, you would need one, right?
Yeah, yeah. And also, especially in that corridor, so. Yeah, that's just something to add. And like, you just skipped it really quick, so can you show me the residential unit as well?
Not the red. With the
Go back.
Oh, yeah.
There you go. Back
There
up.
you go. Okay.
I think, I don't know if this is a requirement, but usually there's some sort of exhaust in the kitchen and bath. Sometimes that can just be straight out from the corridor wall. I don't know if you guys looked at that. One of the things I was thinking about when you were talking about PVC panels was, whether or not PVC, solar panels are appropriate for this building type. Because when we select, systems for residential, we're also thinking about most landlords want to put all the cost of utilities on the tenant. So if you have PVC panels, like, do the tenants benefit in any way from reduced utility cost? Or it's just something to, maybe think about how that would happen. Because, I appreciate the exercise, but it makes me think that if this were an office building, it might be more appropriate because the landlord occupies the building. So they would benefit from all of the savings. Whereas in this program, I'm not really sure how it would work. And this comes up as well with like different types of HVAC systems, because if the landlord has to operate like a main boiler in the building, that's more cost for them. That they can't necessarily, they could submeter it, but then they become a utility company. So it just gets, I think like the point is when you think about energy saving strategies as well as system selections for housing in particular, it's all about how do the utilities work. So that's just something to consider, as you move forward in your career.
They do have package units for them.
Okay.
So their boiler
It's just for
AC
the
is
ground
only
floor.
for the common
Or
areas.
common areas. Okay. The other thing I thought, just in looking at the shear wall diagrams, I don't know exactly what your structural analysis showed, but it just seems a little counterintuitive that the shear walls are running parallel to the lengths of the building. You tend to see the shear walls more in the demising walls running perpendicular to the structure of the building or the main legs of the building. And then I also just noted that it seems a little odd that the primary corner that sort of, or at least one of the two corners, south-facing corners of the building that face downtown has a stair where there could have been a corner unit. So I think, usually with the stairs for residential, we can have a 50-foot dead-end corridor. So we usually try to do that, or, maybe not 50 feet, but maybe put a unit and then the stair. The stair doesn't have to be at the very end. So we usually try to put a unit in that location because it's going to have the best views and it's going to go for a higher rent rate. And then something I didn't get to mention in the last presentation, but I saw as well, was that your ground floor to floor height is only like 10 or 12 feet. Retail usually wants and ground floor like amenity spaces, you want like a larger floor to floor height on the ground floor. And I noticed the last project only had 12 feet. I think you guys had like 10. And I think it's important to consider how, in general, like the ground floor interacts with the environment, with the streetscape, with retail, and that usually the building kind of sits on a little bit taller, floor. And I saw like in one of your elevations, retail was just sort of like a wall of glass. And it just seems to me like there was maybe a missed opportunity to explore what just the facade of retail is, because that's where people walk, where people are going to interact with this building. So how could you kind of get, like that rendering, like how could you get a little more up close and personal with like what the experience is of those people that are walking their dog in the rendering? Like, what is that experience? Is there a strategy for where you enter the retail spaces? Or, how the retail spaces differentiate themselves from each other. Because right now it just kind of looks like an office building on the ground floor. So I think that's really important to consider, and giving that ground floor a little bit extra height can really help you to break it up with different materials and, create an experience for people. So those are all my comments, and I'll stop talking.
Can we go to the structure plans for a minute for parking? So back up, sorry. That wall section you just showed me, could you back it up? A wall section. No, sorry, one more. Sorry. It's that one there. So is this a transfer beam then for this? Is that what that's supposed to be referring to?
Yeah. There's columns there. They're
So this is going to be carried by that transfer beam?
no. I don't think it just showed up in the.
Or there really are columns there?
Yeah, there are columns.
Okay, so essentially that really moves over to the right probably. I mean, I don't know. I guess I understand what you did because you offset the wall slightly.
Yeah,
that's fine.
That's just how it showed up.
Okay.
But there
So-
are columns that line up.
So this will have to pick up that wall.
Yeah. It
Prob-
just picks up-
Probably needs to be deeper, right? But I know it's only one level. Okay. So to go to the comment, but go back to the floor plan with the shear walls that was just brought up. So I'm going to offer a quick suggestion. Eliminate this. Make this a shear wall because it kind of is close to this one. Make that a shear wall.
Because there's hardly any windows in those walls right away.
Right. And then you have steel with either pin or rigid connections, right?
Yeah.
So my suggestion is take that line and make it a line of rigid connections. Take that line, make it a line of rigid connections.
Yeah.
And one of these two would be a line of rigid connections and then stop.
Okay.
The last, sorry, let me back up. The last one would be a rigid connection line along here. Okay. And I think then you've got the stiffness and you have balance in the system for stiffness that would probably be the most straightforward way to go at this point.
I think that's a good point to hear, and I think that's something you ought to amend your package with. Can you go to the first floor plan that shows us how retail absorbs that shear wall? So is the red line along E whatever? Is that the back wall of the retail spaces, guys?
That runs north to south.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay.
But that's not the right orientation for the shear wall. And it's tying up interior space. It is, as was pointed out earlier, it's normally these.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Mhm. Okay. Well, Jason, do you have any other sort of observations? Caitlin?
That's it.
Okay, so we have a little bit more time. I wanted to mention you guys are well under your allotted time, so that was really good. I want to give you a commendation for that. This was a fairly solid project in a lot of ways. There doesn't seem to be like glaring issues or omissions, except that I'm a little disappointed that you guys didn't like take on more of the options.
Yeah. I did start a model.
I'd be interested to see it.
I have all the files ready, and I started the site, and I think it's already cut
Yeah.
and stuff, but it was just like prioritizing.
So this summer, I'd like to see you guys build that model, and I won't be able to change your grade, but I will take you out to lunch if you do finish it and you do photograph it, because I think you need to do that. I think also the omission of that in the current package is a problem because it's really hard for us to see or imagine your building in context. Yeah. None of the elevations are really some of the best elevations you all have done this semester. So I commend you for that. But the context is kind of ghosted out, and it's not really differentiated from the architecture. Except it's just obviously different. It's just gray. So there's no way to understand or appreciate how this building resonates or doesn't very well with what's there. And so one of the motives for the one option, showing everything in context, a very simple option for you to take, you didn't take. You didn't do the model yet, as if that would have been so maybe in not doing those things, I would have worked harder at showing the building in its setting, so that you could have picked up on the observations that Caitlin made about the base, that show sort of the sort of proportion of things stacking vertically, and how the ground floor is kind of underwhelming from that sort of activation perspective. So for me, it's kind of disappointing that, you know, we talked so much this semester about buildings in their place, about this particular special place, this historical neighborhood, and your building is today as good as it's ever been, but still, I can't get you guys to go through the finish line, you know, to show us how this fits into this neighborhood. So in some ways, I'm kind of bummed about that. But I do feel like you covered a number of bases pretty well. Every pitch that we threw at you, you swung at and you hit. You know, I'm not saying that they all went out of the park, but I think you put some, you know, some wood on the ball, and I feel good about that. I also think the idea of generating architectural form from an analysis of lighting and daylighting and solar angles is really a provocative one. And I'm kind of hearkening back to the Larry Scarpa lecture, which if you have not seen, I would watch it again, even if you have seen it, because I think he has a completely different appreciation for how it motivates or creates architectural form. And it would have been a really interesting thing for you to take this further. So instead of just doing an extruded volume, architectural form could have really been sculpted by like direct sunlight. I think that could have been a really interesting sort of provocative approach. Again, a fairly consistent package. I think, you know, you have reasonable layouts for your units, ADA units, and your typical type B units. I really like that you're looking at the tactile and the metal panels, but I don't really, even in the enlarged elevation, I don't really have a sense of like just how good that material is and how really special or beautiful it can be. So if you guys wanted to look at that over the summer, I would encourage you. I'll even buy dessert after lunch if you do that. But, you know, I think it's a fairly solid package. And then, Caitlin, I think, you know, you came a long way this semester in the section. I think this is still something that if I can press you on this, you're still a little unsure about. Is that a fair? Yeah. It's hard. They're really difficult. Like you showed insulation under the cantilevered concrete balcony. I don't know that that's what we would see there. But, you know, when you guys do these balconies that extend out past the normal skin, the normal thermal wall, it's going to grab all that cold weather. It's going to grab that cold temperature and migrate it into the building. So when you guys design these things, you have to say, well, do we do the balconies or not? Right? You don't, like, you could make a case, I think, with your developer that they don't do them because this is an issue. This is such an issue that we have to revisit the way we're going to do it, or whether we're going to do it at all. The other option is to do what I call hung balconies, right? Where you hang them from clevis and turnbuckles and rods and all of that stuff. And they're literally baskets, right? Saddlebags, like messenger bags, right? That hang off of the skin. And they're completely independent of the skin and the structure, and they don't transfer something thermally. So thinking, you know, so I could have told you that like 2 or 3 weeks ago, you know, Caitlin, like, wake up, don't do a balcony that extends out past the slab or past the normal skin with a slab. You know, I could have said, don't do that. Here's what you should do. But I resisted doing that because I wanted you to kind of uncover it. So next time, right, when you guys do these buildings, dryer vents, trash, right, trash chutes, as Dasman will attest, trash chutes, and balconies are the 3 problem children, right, in these mixed-use residential buildings. I think I said that week 1. And now we're gonna close with you guys on that same thought.
Can you go to that energy model information at the back end? Now, were you in Dustin's class this semester?
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, I was impressed with the values you're getting because, you know, you're what, 59 cents, right? Is that right?
Yes.
With the PUV contribution. So that's like very, very well done, right? I mean, that's a very good solution to be that low. So I know there's a whole series of parameters that you get to adjust on Entered Insight 360, right? So the only question I would have is, you know, does your building really meet them? In other words, does your R value match up to what you ran through the simulation for the roof, for the wall? Your air tightness, you know, reduction of infiltrations, right? Air infiltration per hour. Is it really going to match up? That makes sense. Are you going to drop your lighting power density, you know, to get the lighting load down, right? So my point is to make sure that when I see these, it's always interesting, but what's really important to me is also saying, okay, now show me how you accomplish this to bring it down, and that your building really does it. Because it's easy to click on 90% or 80% PV, right? Get the number, but then I look at the project and I say, right, it's not that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I would suggest if they're talking about some, additional issues to think about, I would say bring some clarity to, you know, how do you get to that point with some of the decisions that you made, right? Is that
maybe just do like one of these to feature my?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I have, this is what I selected, and this is what we'll do to accomplish that, or we've already met it, like our value is that.
Okay, why don't we take a 10-minute break? We'll be back at 7 o'clock. Thanks. Thank you, Caitlin and Casey. Are you guys next? Okay. You guys are next? Awesome.
I'm ready for that drink now. Stat. So there's like a hop there after.
Yeah, I'm down.
What? No, I know this is the final review.
How much is it?
Today and tomorrow, or today and tomorrow, Thursday.
I woke up at 6 a.m.
Tomorrow I'm home, but Thursday is going to be a mix. Probably 9. Probably 9:30.
I slept for an hour, went to work for 7 hours, came back, didn't sleep Sunday night.
I sleep in between like rendering times. Like when it renders, I just take a nap.
I'm glad you said those were the nice celebrations because I didn't know that you could just rasterize it and make it like really small until like I was done. But that celebration crashed 4 times on Friday night because it was a 2.5-day file. And I was like, I'm dead. I literally sat and did it for like 3 hours. Every time it said crash Illustrator, I'm like, I lost everything. Oh, God. I don't know what to do. Jeez, we did good. Yeah.
So Lumion can actually do fake watercolor renderings.
I don't know.
Did you play with it before?
Lumion crashed my computer.
Did it really?
Yeah.
He keeps telling me my computer's not good enough, but Richard went out and bought that new computer to run Lumion. This thing runs just fine.
Well, mine's defective.
Okay.
I subscribed to like our free student tutorial, and I had it downloaded, but I wouldn't have space. I know, that's really cool.
Did you just use that?
So Lumion rendering. Did you do that?
Yeah.
What?
I'm not kidding. That's our Revit model. We just dropped in there.
That's really good.
You've had a pretty long day, haven't you, Professor?
Yeah.
You can do a fake watercolor rendering.
Well, that looks neat. Actually, I get the European schools, when I see work coming out of them, it's like they don't use the photorealistic rendering. They do that.
Yeah, it kind of lets the person who's looking at it make a couple decisions instead of you making a decision.
Conley just got, I told you that, right? They just started to do Lumion renderings.
Oh,
They would have taught me if I like, used my lunch hour to try and go to their sessions, but
So that's the photorealistic version of it.
yeah, this is the live version, so you can see, you can actually take a video of like butterflies fluttering around.
Or sun definitely across the.
I just wanted to I wanted to take like this last 100 grads through 2 hours to do my hand drawings while I could.
I guess so.
My money's worth out of those prisoners.
You'll never get your money's worth.
How many degrees have you had today?
$150 for 24 of them.
I was 2 thesis students, then I was in.
No, Casey, where were you?
I paid it.
I bought that cat from my house for
I mean, there's
Why would you ever buy prisoners from my house?
If I would choose your 50%.
on Thursdays.
Yeah, I probably did. I'm talking about retail price, not sale.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
That's our own fault. Just getting used to it.
First of all, it was my mom.
Yeah, have a nice class.
Wow.
Using your mommy's money.
Oh, yeah.
So you're on Thursday.
Well, I don't
The
like
last
that.
one.
Oh, yeah, you're gonna get a color.
I want
That was a good comment about
And you knew
adjust the program to
I
get what
do.
you want
I want to
instead
say
of like
board.
putting in a parameter.
And that's sort of my point when I see some of these from the comp design.
I hate it saying it to Nancy. I feel like everyone knows it's me.
You have to.
Probably. You can
I didn't
imagine
know.
they
I
have
thought it was cute.
Because it's just too easy to put all these things for the value you want. So,
Yeah.
look what I got.
Every time you
My
cut
dad
somebody
bought
off.
me a Mercedes and it's not.
Actually, some people, I'm not sure that in some cases it's hard to
That was a
understand.
$60,000 car.
We definitely had a lot of trouble.
Okay, but
getting,
you paid for
just getting a Revit model
That
in there
is
was
20 times
accurate
value.
and accurate to our
I
value
got
as
my
well.
car for $6,000.
Yeah, I know.
My
Doesn't
my
work
first
that
car
well.
was $5,000.
So how is your, you have a pretty close to material building at this point?
You gotta, next time, you gotta grow your stairs bigger.
Stairs bigger?
Yeah,
You're talking
your
about, like,
stair volume is
show
too small.
something? Or
They're not designed large enough.
So you know, on the third
long
floor,
ways or transverse?
Can I run that?
Yeah, on the third floor where you come off the elevator and make the right door, they're just completely. So I don't know if it's still there, but they can have some beverages and stuff. I'll go check it out.
It has to
Grab
be
a-
such
grab a
that
couple of cans of copper.
Do they have coffee?
Still left, yeah, they had coffee.
circle, that is the minimum design width.
I did end up going to
This
that
door
Richard
cannot
house in
Did you do that?
Oxford County. I think
So
it
if
was.
this,
Right.
if this is.
That was a really neat setup that they had.
4 feet.
The house itself
This
was
can't
like a
be
two
less
bedroom
than half of
setup.
that.
That's a good point. I
And they
when I was
had
looking at
And
it,
that causes these dimensions.
Compost
of the
pile outside
stairways
that
to
they
get
used
bigger.
for in-floor heating, so they
Here
ran the
and-
tubing through the compost pile
And here.
and then ran it into the floor of the house.
I wonder how much energy they have. They really got the.
So here's the section.
The pile
Yeah,
itself,
so
they
here-
measured
here's
temperature
what I
140
usually find, depending on the
inside
floor
of
to
it.
floor. It's usually
Wow,
that.
there must be a lot of work to keep turning it.
I didn't actually know this, but I
And
Here's
depending
like
on
barn
how,
fires
and
start.
depending on how big this is.
Because
Yeah, they can, I believe they
That could be
actually
a foot or
can. If the
6
grass or
inches.
something, dry
When it gets
matter
bigger,
ignites.
that goes to 10.
well, yeah, like well, it's wet. You put wet hay into a barn, and then it gets so hot from the decomposition, and then it starts on fire.
Same thing with grain elevators. If they don't turn the grain, it'll ignite.
Really? See, there's an enormous amount of power, or at least heat there, that should be used.
Yeah, I guess you could do a cogeneration idea out of the brain elevator. I mean, they do it with electrical power plants and some other. I think actually now landfills are using it. They just extract the methane and they use it to power their.
There is an option by Consumers Energy as far as the net metering goes. It includes methane generation for farms. I was looking into that for our projects. We had the batteries, right? The battery rooms for energy storage on site.
But you can through DTE. They actually have the ability for you to, what they say is buy wind power. Now in reality, you're not. The wind power is way up there in Traverse City.
I sold that for 2 or 3 weeks. I was one of the salesmen for that.
Okay, so you know what that's about.
Yeah.
You pay a premium to them. The argument is that they so I guess
I was selling you paying more money
or just draw it closer.
I know, and at the end of the day, though, I think lead won't accept that.
No, they don't count as
they
don't count as RECs. They don't count
because it's not really alternative energy in that sense. It's just subsidizing alternative energy. I don't think they count it.
So what? Yeah, that was interesting, but I did find that Consumers was like hee-hawing over the program, and they won't make a decision until 2019 as far as the net metering goes.
Yeah, I'm hearing that they're thinking of not being as generous with that.
Selling it to you at retail or not at retail, something like that. Just
we're talking about stormwater.
Stormwater rocks.
all of it.
It's right up there with drivers.
I don't remember what it was.
Okay, are we ready? Okay, just a second. I want to get the clock going. And then I think I need to mute in a second, but I want to also mention that the options menu on the back does not include driving in from Darien, Connecticut. So I think you should get like at least 3 points for that. And I want to know, I want Nora and Nathan and Jess to know that, you know, you could have gotten 3 points if you had driven in like Andrew did. So I'm just rubbing it in, guys.
I think they need more points if you're coming from New Mexico.
Okay, so we're ready when you guys are. Who's going to run the slide deck? You, Andrew?
Yeah.
But where are you're not on the?
My internet just dropped.
So go to guest. You don't use the main one. I find that Lawrence Tech guest. And can't use Desmond's because she doesn't have a microphone.
So that's off.
Yeah. It's a microwave.
Looks like you arrived.
Okay.
Too much tears.
Okay.
My name is Andrew.
And I'm Desmond.
And this is our final project, of course.
Here's our little table of contents just to show what each section is in. Okay, so here's our design proposal with a lovely night rendering of our building.
Of course, from the previous projects, we know the address, and of course, it has some exterior space, 50 units that we needed, underground parking, storefronts, and a fitness center. This was when we started doing a few different options to figure out what we wanted the building shape to be. We explored 3 main shapes, the L shape, O shape, and C shaped, basically on the corner of Alfred and John R. Street. And it came down basically with the parking that we needed to fit on one side, and also the alley to load and unload that helped choose that L shape that you see on the left. And then this is what it looks like when it's all together with the footprint. And you can see the existing site condition in the top left, or top right actually.
And then we chose the orientation of the building based upon the sun path. We wanted most of the residential rooms as well as the retail to face the street front so that it would get maximum natural lighting. And then here are some of the site conditions within the areas, and we show a little bit of our amenities from the bird's eye view. Okay, and here's our structural system. Okay, so we decided to go with the delta beam floor system to have the ability to be free of shear walls throughout the building, have a large wood span without columns showing through, and it has a long durability.
And then right here, we could see that each column is actually a fixed connection, so that eliminates the need for shear walls, as you just mentioned. And then also, in addition to that, there's the stiffness from the CMU blocks that are at the elevator walls and also the staircase walls. So that helps stiffen the whole building, and it's very durable for the system. And then right here, these are the 2 connections that we use. So you can see the columns stacked on top of columns of the delta beam pieces, and then also the concrete column itself when we need basically a type of pin connection is shown on the left. And that's basically the girder directly to our concrete column that we're proposing. Yeah. And then this one right here, those are showing the overall columns that we're proposing with this delta beam system. And you can notice there's also some on the elevator CMU walls and also on the CMU walls for the staircase. So that's because we have to span those delta beams running into those walls. So those columns kind of pick up that weight. So it's not just on the CMU itself. And those are the 20-inch hollow core planks, by the way.
So here's our foundation plan. It shows our columns and footings. We used concrete columns and footings. You can see them evenly displayed throughout the building. Here is our parking system. We were able to maximize the space with 50 parking spaces underneath so that we could have a free green space above. We show some bike parking within the middle of there. We've got also underground storage beneath the rampway, as well as the ventilation system throughout the space. This is our section. You can see how the delta beam system is displayed through the floors.
And then right here, just a quick plumbing detail for the drainage system, how it has the vent stacks going up to the waist, and also where that exits the building. Just a quick little iteration for that.
And then here's another section to show a little bit more in detail about the kind of structure that we have with the construction methods shown in the detail.
So I'm sorry, where's the wood joist portion?
It's the wood flooring on top of the delta beam system.
Oh, so just flooring, not joist. Sorry, that's just a typo.
It's not a joist.
Correct, yeah.
That's what Revit shows.
This is for lateral loads and glazing. So part of the glazing that we chose, mainly what's displayed here are for the storefront windows, the curtain wall system itself. So it has a U factor of 0.31, which meets the needed performance shown on the next slide, meets the design load also with the PSF, and also has the acoustical performance with the sound transmission class for the street noise. So there's a few details from Revit on the left there showing that system, and also explained on this one too, going further showing the U-value requirements in the zone 5A where Michigan is, and also meeting the U factor of the 0.31, also shown on this one actually. So the solar heat gain, which is also part of this, we came to a total U factor around 0.3, with the visible light of around 65% for the bottom floors. And total for the solar heat gain, we came to about 0.32. And that's with the curtain wall system that we just showed previously.
All right, and here we've got our planning and configuration. So this is our code compliance sheet showing different occupancy, occupant load, egress, surface volume ratio, and sound and space usage.
Yeah, the chart in the bottom right was for planning the floors, saying how much light they need, how much noise they need, and how to separate those based upon those factors.
So here's our first floor layout. We've got amenities such as the retail space, leasing office, conference room, the exercise room, lobby and lounge. And you can also see the outdoor space to the bottom left area.
And of course, that's that ramp we were talking about that helped us choose the L shape. That ramp takes up a lot of space, and also a loading area along the alley down here.
Mm-hmm.
Are those planters?
Shrubs. And then here's our 2 and 4 for the residential floors. So in the little armpit of the building, on the 2nd and 4th floors, we've got the laundry lounge as well as the office studio. And then on the 2nd or the 3rd and 5th floors, we have the business center in that little armpit of the building.
And a few little designs for interior design, just showing a few different options for the inside. And these are, of course, to match the historical aspect within the city with the herringbone pattern, chevron floor, subway tile dating back to the time frame when most of Detroit was actually started. So that's where we got the basis for those. Some elevations here with the exterior of the building, showing the cladding system, the different materials that are in use, which we'll explore in a second, and then also the windows, the storefront windows for the residential units.
And then here we have a few of our material choices like the concrete, fiber cladding, brick, and CMU. Okay, building enclosure system.
So there's a few details right here. So basically the left one is showing, it's a small little screenshot of how the cladding system attaches to the exterior of the building. The middle one is basically showing the top floor. We're not using the delta beam for the weight top floor, we're using the more like the steel beam to go on top of that, since it doesn't need much of a load-bearing surface on the top. And then also wherever the brick is, we're using the metal stud on the brick with that continuous insulation shown on the right.
So I'm sorry, can you back up for a minute? What is behind this?
On the right side?
Right here. What's back in here that connected?
Oh, so it's connected to, it's a cladding system. So that's basically, if you look on the brick one on the bottom right, it's basically in place of that brick system. So that goes on top of the continuous insulation bolted into the studs.
What's the backup system? I mean, is it a steel stud wall? What is it?
Oh yeah, it's a steel stud wall, just like the one on the right.
That?
Yes.
That's what's behind that.
Correct. So the brick.
Where does the CMU?
The CMU is in the staircase. There's a staircase in the exterior walls and also the elevator.
Yep.
Correct. And then for the interior walls, we're looking into doing this staggered wall system, basically a 2x6 top and bottom plate with a staggered 2x4 metal stud in between, so that the vibration to the sound won't really transmit through the different units.
And then we've got the installation and roof system showing the insulation around the ground floor. And then the roof system, we've got a roof pump detail and then just the layout of the membrane. And we've got our units and HVAC strategy. Here's our reflected ceiling/lighting plan. The plans are a little bit more diagrammatic just to show how much space would be illuminated by the lighting fixtures. And we've got all of the fixtures listed up at the top, as well as a few renderings of what the spaces would look like lit.
And of course, for safety, emergency lights that are required are in there also.
And then here shows our individual units with the lighting fixtures in them. It shows them from the west side, and this is illuminated at night as well as during the day.
And then for the fire suppression broken down, you can see overall throughout the hallway how it's in the main hallway section with the standpipes and the staircase, and then also broken down to the individual rooms. You can see how the fire suppression stands throughout there and provides the sprinkler system throughout the whole apartment. For the hot water system, we wanted to use a separate unit, just like we were talking about how the apartments are separate for cost. So these basically are shown in this one if you look on the right image where that orange kind of rectangle is. So all that we need is that cold water supply going throughout the building, saving time, saving labor from putting a hot pipe in there. So it basically branches off into the apartment and then makes that hot water and spreads it through the apartment by itself. Just a few slides left.
Yeah.
This is the central HVAC unit, which would be located outside for areas such as the fitness room, lower levels, and anything besides the residential units.
So our HVAC zone shows all of the main spaces, and then the residential spaces get their own HVAC systems, which is, oh, no, okay, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay. That was just a quick one showing the ductwork with the little return in there with the Magic Pack system that takes the return right into the unit on the wall and then spreads it out with the supply.
And then this is a little more info about the Magic Pack system and how it works through the units.
Of course, sitting in the closet, easy to access for maintenance and repairs. Detail of that. And then a few slides left, ADA and life safety.
So this is showing all of the ADA accessible spaces throughout the average apartment as well as by the elevators.
And of course, the elevator has a turn radius and also for the basket for any medical ways they need to get up that basket can go on the elevator and turn around with the required width.
And then this is showing our egress pathway. The bottom one, or the one on the left, is for the bottom level, which is for the parking. And then the ones on the right show throughout the different floors the paths of egress from each apartment. Ta-da.
Thank you.
Did you show elevations of the?
We did. They're in the way beginning. We had them more of like a rendered elevation.
You missed it.
Oh. So is there a different treatment on the east and north than there is on the west and south of materials? Or is it just different color? There's like a dark.
Oh, maybe it's with that render.
Can you just walk through like what?
Well, the ones on the east and north have the balconies, so they're set a little bit back so the sun's not reaching them.
That's a metal cladding, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a metal cladding system in the dark gray that you're seeing.
So that's why it's a little darker.
I'm just finding that, like, in general, the elevations, I'm having a hard time seeing this building in historic Bush Park, you know, the sort of horizontally oriented windows, and then the sort of maybe lack of articulation of materials on the facade, even the sort of like muddy color of the panels, you know, it just, I appreciate that this studio, maybe the emphasis wasn't on necessarily the facade design, but I do think given the context of this particular place that, I don't know, it's just kind of reading as, the elevations aren't reading as really playing off of any historic character or, you know, it just doesn't seem to tie in with its context. And I guess maybe that's also just because I'm only looking at the elevations and the renderings even are night renderings. So like, I don't really feel like I know what this building looks like right now. And I'm not sure like. It kind of looks like, an outdoor motel. Like, I don't mean to, like, you know, with the kind of in California where you have like all those exterior balconies that wrap the whole building and you access your unit from the outside. Like, that's kind of the language that it's reading. And I just, so for me, like, I guess I think all of your presentation was very comprehensive in terms of checking all the boxes. So for me, like, the thing I jumped to next is the architecture and the design and what this building would mean here in this place. So I think it's not quite clicking for me, and I don't know if it's that maybe that just wasn't the focus of this project, and that maybe more time was spent on the technical aspects of the project, which I think is great. You know, I think it's awesome, but I'm just, you know, knowing what this neighborhood is like and knowing the historical significance of the neighborhood, I'm having a hard time seeing this building here.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say to a degree the analogy you pulled up a moment ago is the one that came to my mind as well. It doesn't seem necessarily to suggest a higher quality residential environment that we would see in the area. It unfortunately has more the characteristics of the lower cost, if you will, hotel properties that we see. Just in terms of massing and expression. I mean, I know you have certain materials that you're thinking about that are higher quality materials, but just more in the detail.
Right, and I wonder if even just looking at changing the tones of the materials to something that's a little more vibrant or dynamic could help. At this point, you know, it's not like changing the balcony design is an option, but perhaps there's a way to look at sort of the rendering style. I even think too, like, you know, windows are really important in residential spaces, and I know that maybe you guys are trying to hit a certain U value, you know, as you talked about, but how do you balance the amount of fenestration on a building with those R values? And that's something we have to kind of battle back and forth with. And I think, you know, the scale of the windows, even like these little ones on the red, I don't know if that's in a unit or in a stair, but they just seem small, you know, given the size and scale of the building itself. So I don't know, like, were the window sizes dependent on trying to hit certain values, or were they just what you chose for the design?
Yeah, pretty much off the values, just trying to hit that mark for the ASHRAE and everything.
So what percent glazing do you have?
No.
It's here somewhere.
Yeah, right.
I know, like, sliding doors can be some of the most inefficient glazing components, and perhaps, I don't know if those were evaluated separately, but I know those can drag down your values because usually the glazing isn't as insulated, and just sliding doors just suck for energy efficiency.
Air infiltration.
Right.
I mean, I actually would target you for what? I'm sorry, 40%.
I think it's 40%. Yeah, that we had in the image.
I think you're above that.
Yeah.
So I think it's commendable that you're, you know, trying to balance all these factors, but at the end of the day, you know, stepping back and looking at what you've designed and thinking about, okay, we've checked all the boxes from a technical aspect, but how do we then take a look at what this project means for this neighborhood, and is it appropriate, and do we think, you know, it would be a lasting part of this community, and really kind of evaluating in that way, I think, is another very important box that needs to be checked.
Okay.
So I really commend you guys on the sort of the overall detail that you went into. I'm just not convinced that this project would be here, you know. So.
How did you develop your energy model? I know you started that earlier.
Was that for the U values? Do you mean?
No. You did the Insight 360 work earlier, right?
We started to.
Yeah, finished.
yet.
We don't have a fully updated one, so we didn't put it in here yet.
Can we go to structure for a minute? I do want to clarify one point. I mean, we talked about having connection column to column.
That was at the way beginning. Yeah. Oh yeah, with the delta beam with the.
Right, but stop with that slide again.
This one or?
Right. Just wait before you get off that. The rigidity in the frame is not just going to come from the columns. It's also going to come from the primary radius. So I know delta beam, it seems to me, if I recall, there's a rigid connection on that.
Okay, these two, I think.
I think that you want to think about having some of the bays as connections, just like we talked about earlier with the project, because again, you need that sense, right?
Oh, so it does.
The column alone is not going to do it. You gotta have it along with it.
Oh, okay. That does.
So I'm careful about saying all my connections are right. That is the connection.
Hmm.
Right? You have the locations. Go to the park level. Now, the one you call foundation, sorry, go back earlier here. Yeah. This is the foundation. I don't see anything above ground. Right? The only thing I notice see are the vertical foundation hooks below the columns and the pad. Right?
Those dash lines. And, yeah.
Anything that you have above ground is not what I'm cutting through. It's above it. Okay. Does that make sense?
It does.
And, I mean, it would probably be relevant to know that there's an elevator pit, probably know that's show up. Stairs won't go below grade, but at least it's useful to know that it's there. As we go up to the next level, then I guess I said this multiple times, but there's a beam shown right here. Correct.
Oh, right here.
Right here. Sorry, one of you step over and see the screen that I went to.
Oh, I see.
Right here.
Oh, here?
Okay.
What?
Cutting through
That cannot go through a stair.
Cutting through the south stair.
Especially-
That cannot go through a stairs. Not right.
I think what we did for that, actually, I have it in one of the updated ones.
Okay, but you understand what I'm getting at. It doesn't, it looks like the beam's going through the stairs. Right? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, that makes sense. It should be cut off.
Like, there's not like eyelash coming out of that concrete stair core, right?
Correct.
You're gonna pick it up.
Yeah.
So you can't cut the stairs. I think we talked about that before, right? So revise that, please. It's got to show up on the structure plan. You may have it somewhere else, but it's got to show up on the plans that you were showing me a moment ago, okay? Because it's got to be consistent. So let's go to the parking level. So one of the things I'm not at parking level, thank you. I wasn't really certain I understood was, why do I need this at all? And why do I need this at all? Well, I guess I have to have this one, but I understand that. But this small bay over here in the corner, why do I need that little bay in the corner, like between these two columns?
I guess that's column line 5.
Is that 5 and 6?
Yes.
You can understand what I'm getting at? It's like, what do I need 5? Could I just have had 6? What?
Because that's the maximum for the.
Oh, you're up against the span limit of the delta beam. Is that what that's about? Yeah, that's the other side of it, is that because you got some really big bays here, right? Your system's going to be driven by ceiling depth by the biggest bay, right? So even though you have smaller bays up in here, right? Smaller bays, I guess, over in here.
52.
Everything is driven by the big bay, which could lead to some economy, but it's going to lead to thickness. Right? It's going to make your.
Which means a deeper floor to floor for that lowest that parking level. That's going to have to get carved out more.
Right.
Which means the ramp is longer, or steeper, right? Because everything has a reaction.
All ripples back. I think the parking seems to have been worked out, right?
Yeah, although I would say that the half moon stripy areas at the top and the bottom, you wouldn't do that. You would just, because really that drive aisle needs to be about 20 feet or 18 feet, whatever you've got. So
a smaller edge condition, not that one. It's a smaller. Okay, can you go up to the next level? I'm sorry, could you go to ground level? Okay. So again, my one quick question, is this your property line out here that you're putting plantings on, or is it sidewalk?
That's the sidewalk.
So that's the sidewalk that you're trying to put plantings on? I just want to make sure I understand this.
Some of the line work's confusing because I'm not really sure where the curbs are, where the sidewalks are.
So if you're going to put plantings out there, it needs to be your property, or maybe you put pots out on the sidewalk and you'll see if they'll let you do it, right? That makes sense? That's not fair. I wasn't really sure what were you trying to do with this. This is an open space largely, right?
Yeah.
Not too much development there. You know, I don't know what that would be like as an open space. You might want to think about that as a side. Can we go to HVAC? Stop. I'm sorry. The typical unit HVAC, not plumbing, sorry. So I know that you've got the magic pack for the unit, right? Could you go to the one with the ducts in it? It has the unit with the ducts, that one. Can we stop there? Same problem, the same question I would have had for Caitlin. You know, what is the power source for air conditioning? What is the power source for heating? Also, I see one duct here. I do not see supply and return. There needs to be supply and return. We've seen those before, right? As they have both.
Over to lower levels.
Yeah, there's got to be supply and return in here, like we've seen today with the other schemes. Also, this looks like there's only one return here, right? And then is the only supply I'm going to have to the bathroom and the bedroom? Why wouldn't I have supplies up here?
I think we were planning just to have a supply in the center of the hallway that would spread out into your living room. But I know it was kind of far away to get.
Well, I don't know about that. I think you may have to have something over here. But also, if that's an exterior wall in certain cases with the units, you definitely need something out there, right? I'll stop there, sorry.
No, you already mentioned what I was going to say, so.
Right. So he doesn't make your life easier, right?
Yeah, and then also I had a same impression with her. Like I was literally driving from California to Michigan, so I actually slept in that cheap hotel while I was doing it. So I was trying really hard why I think like it looks like a hotel, but I don't know, maybe you can answer.
No, this is their project.
I mean, I don't want to be rude. I mean, overall, you established a lot, like, but yeah, it's just that's something.
But that's the challenge of being an architect, is like doing everything you did today and designing a great building. And it's, you know, a building that fits its context, and it's so challenging. I'll say, just because I haven't really commented on any of the unit plans, but I think there's some units that I thought when you were flipping through looked pretty good. But like that one with the ducts in it, like the bathroom was almost as big as one of the bedrooms. I don't know how much time you guys, like as a class, spent on kind of unit design. But I mean, I like seeing all the furniture, like test fitting, you know, okay, go ahead.
Well, we wanted, in the beginning, Mark told us we wanted the bedroom spaces to be a lot smaller than the spaces.
Mm-hmm.
So we did our design based on that.
Got it.
Have the 80 for the bathroom.
Right.
So that's why
But, you know, like not every bathroom will have to have a full turning radius in it, only usually like 2 to 5%.
And I think in the context of like older people.
Sure.
So what are the dimensions of this bedroom from this wall to here and from this wall to here? Can you tell us what those are?
We'd have to.
I think
We got like the full room.
right? I think HUD has like minimum dimensions, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that instinct is nice to say, okay, like people are going to be spending most of their time in the living room, so kind of proportionally giving that to the living space. So I'm glad like the furniture is test fitting, but like that test fit of furniture, like 2 huge ass couches with no where to get into the space, like, you know, test fit the furniture, but also show something that works. You
The
know?
wheelchair person cannot get through here.
Right.
And
So-
they're going to have some lounging.
Right. But like I appreciate certain things like, you know, 2 vanities in the bathroom when it's, you know, a 2-bedroom unit, you know, things like that. So I think there's things that you guys are picking up on. And I appreciate that all of the furniture is there and that both have closets and all these things. But I think as you move forward, like you'll find that the dimensions of these spaces, you know, are going to matter a lot more. And that the sort of, you know, the attempt here is a good start, but I just noticed some peculiarities like that really small bedroom, or like in the HVAC plan, if you go back to the HVAC unit, you know, the bathroom in that unit is almost as big as the bedroom. So the proportions, you know, I just get the sense, and like the bed in the other unit is like, there's nowhere to get to it. So, and that's why like when you're designing multifamily, having modularity of units, like just having 2 to 3 really well-designed units and then just stacking them is really effective, rather than trying to design 7 or 8 unique units for every different scenario. We at HA, you know, we just try to design units that are flexible. So open spaces, you know, open kitchens and living rooms that people can do whatever they want in, and then just a simple bathroom layout that stacks throughout the whole building so that all of your plumbing stacks and it reduces cost. But anyway, I digress, and, you know, that was just something I picked up on to think about in the future.
Yeah, that 1 bedroom width looks like it's more like in the 7 feet range, or 7.5 feet. I think it's, what is HUD, 8 minimum?
Yep.
It's got to be 8 minimum to hit HUD level requirements, and you really want to be more than that, right? So that one's a really tight squeeze. So.
Well, we're out of time, but I do want to make a 1 or 2 sort of observations. You know, I'm sure you feel like you crossed the finish line. I want you to recognize, I want to recognize that you both crossed the finish line, and I'm delighted about that. There were moments where I think I was rooting you on from the sideline, maybe even screaming at you to run faster. And then there were moments where I felt like I was pulling the rope to drag you across the finish line. But whatever it took, you got there. So I'm delighted about that. These are really difficult buildings, aren't they? Right? It's okay to admit that. They're really, really difficult to do. Made more difficult by the sort of humidity, if you will, of an historic setting, an historic context to operate in that has its own sort of requirements. So what I guess I'd say to you is that, what I say to both of you is that if you recognize that these are buildings that architects are going to have to be doing more of in the future, because this housing question is not going to be answered by doing buildings that look just like this. It's going to be answered by doing buildings that fit the place that they're designed for and that solve all of the myriad of sort of design problems that you all had to confront this semester. So you're going to get more of these to do. Sorry. That's going to be kind of the steady diet for architects in the future. And I think what you both need to do is go see architecture, right? Like go to buildings, go to buildings that look like this, go in and like ride the elevator up to a floor, look at a unit, go into the lobbies, look at the way they're laid out, sense the proportions and the dimensions of these rooms. If you can't get in and see a unit, ask them to show you one. The more you take in these buildings, the more informed you're going to be as designers. I believe that you can't be an architect if you don't look at architecture. You can't go through your career kind of with blinders on, assuming that everything looks like a Red Roof Inn or a Hampton Inn or whatever they call them, right? So I think it's really incumbent on you guys to travel and to not just go to cool places, but actually take diversion and go look at buildings and walk through them, sketch them, photograph them, and ask to really look at them. I think that's going to be important for you.
So this, to follow up on that, this summer, if Desmond, you haven't been to Cranbrook recently, this summer when the weather gets better, you take your camera with you and you walk around Cranbrook and look at all the great works of architecture there. That would be something.
Not just the old stuff too, right?
Right,
but even the new stuff that's there.
And you're in New Haven, Andrew, right? You go to Yale. And
Oh,
bring your
God,
camera
yeah.
with you, and there's old stuff and new stuff. And I think that's what Professor Farrell was talking about. You got to get out there and get yourself exposed to what architecture can be, not what it is when I drive home, right? Or when you drive home. I don't come in contact with a lot of the real interesting things. I'll tell you, from here to home for me, the new Lear building along Telegraph.
So that's probably the only one.
That's it. After that, it's like, I can forget it.
Yeah, but you have to go see Lear. It's you got to go.
Go down Telegraph to Lear. Make a right. The new Lear
So
headquarters
see, now that's
off
the
of
issue,
Telegraph.
right? So you have to know where the architecture is, right? And you know what? It's not just that there's Lear on Telegraph in Southfield, north of 8 Mile on the west side, right? But like you can go anywhere and see architecture. I can drive you up to Goodhart, and you can see one of the most important buildings in all of North America by Richard Meyer. I can take you to Alma, Michigan, and I can show you a Frank Lloyd Wright school church, right? I can take you to Kalamazoo, and I can show you 5 Frank Lloyd Wright houses, just like that. So wherever you want to go, there's going to be architecture to see, but you got to sort of like engage people and ask people and talk to people about what's there and go to it. You have to carve out time, right?
And I think at the end of your career, at least some of us think about what was it that made it worthwhile. And in part, sometimes it's because you can go back and point to something that I worked on.
Yeah.
And so, hopefully you'll have that opportunity working in firms. It's going to be the buildings you want to talk about, the buildings you want people to see.
I love that you mentioned Cranbrook. I dragged Tracy there on Saturday night, and then I went back again on Sunday because we didn't see everything. And you know what? I had a great weekend, 3 hearts. I can't remember the last time Tracy said that to me, and it was a pure architecture, like read boring, right? It was a pure architecture weekend for her and me, and yet, right? I figured like I got another 28 years with her now, right? So even your friends, even your spouse, right, can be part of this sort of journey of discovery. But it's really important now that you kick this in. You got to kick this into gear. Okay? Cool. Thank you, Desmond. Thank you, Andrew. Thanks for driving out, or flying out, rather. Flying out. I appreciate that. Okay, who's next? John and Stefan? Okay. This will be the last one for tonight, and I got to turn my...
Everyone's muted.
Someone needs to turn on their microphone. I'm going to text Trevor to let him know.
All right, cool.
the building is going to be off Alfred, which is more of your residential street rather than.
Could everybody hear us? Sorry, I don't think our microphone's on.
We got it.
So moving on, just kind of going to the massing development. We started off with using a square and transposing the adjacent properties onto our shape and seeing how those sightlines and how those faces kind of transfer, how they create the form. So it naturally derives the L shape.
With this slide, we're just showing the energy analysis for the three shapes that we were considering at one point. The main takeaway here is the L shape not only works best with our program, but also has the lowest energy intensity. So it just strengthens our design choice there. This is our bioclimatic response. The main takeaway is heating and humidification takes most of our energy usage. Here is massing strategy, core locations. The preferred would be a single loaded core on the north end, but for program reasons, we're doing the double core.
So transitioning to the floor plans, our lower level, the parking level, we fit all 50 parking spaces with 2 compact and 2 handicap accessible. The common core is the 2-hour fire separation that was required. Moving forward onto the main floor plan, we had the retail located off of Alfred and John R. Right in that prime real estate corner. All the building functions are situated on the south-hand side, and the leasing office and building lobby is on your is closer to the historic house. So moving on to the second floor, we're just kind of showing our typical layouts of how we broke it out into type A and type B, and how many studios, 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. Like John said, it's a double loaded corridor, and we have a mix of everything that is required. We're also showing the egress to the staircases. And this kind of floor plate transfers from this design transfers from one floor plate to another, with the common area changing every 2 levels, being an open atrium space. So as you can see over here, it's cut out to the lower level, and you can access it from the floor above. So moving on to the 5th floor, because we had to adhere to the 50 unit requirements, the 5th floor was reduced, giving us 2 terraces, 1 more for public use and the 1 for mechanical purposes. Just getting into the building section, we're just showing we'll talk about it later on, but we're using the podium system. So we have the 3-hour separation between our retail and our residential occupancy above. So getting into the elevations, we're just kind of showing how we decided to use cement fiber boards in both wood look and the equitone cement panels, and how we're varying and taking the context of the surrounding and bringing it into our building. So the corners are kind of exposed to show the wood that we're going to be introducing later on as a structural system, and the cement board as a more grounding base to it.
So so for this slide here, we're just showing that kitty corner to our building right across from the main anchor retail is the Gillis House. And so we're trying to pay homage to that with the corner, again, anchor area. And then also down the street from us is another historic high-rise MERB building. So with that, we're showing that there's a linear separation from the podium to the above floors.
So this is just more of a breakdown of how we decided to use the materials to kind of give you that masonry feel on the lower levels, and then go with the equitone panels higher up, and exposing that since we are doing experimentation into mass timber, we wanted to use the corner facades to show how this product is being used throughout the system and kind of reveal our material choices.
So for the site plan here, we're the main thing that we're implementing here. Well, the main issue was that we wanted to bring in natural light to the garage because it's a large space, so as many skylights as we could put in. And then another issue was bringing planters and green space to the site plan at grade, and then also to provide natural ventilation for the garage level. So those were 3 issues that we decided that we could accommodate for with planters that would incorporate skylights as well as natural ventilation ducts. So we have different level planters for either trees and then the lower planters for bushes, flowers.
So here we're just showing a street level view of the building and how you would walk out and see what you would see and how you would experience the building itself. Getting into the structural system, like I said previously, we are using the podium construction type. So we have concrete columns and slabs on the lower 2 levels and mass timber for our main structural system on the residential units with ordinary stick frame as our inset pellet panels for carrying the facades. So here we're just kind of showing our structural system and how the bays kind of lay out, and the common core being concrete as well. Moving forward, we're introducing a solid concrete wall here just to kind of carry the load from the structure above. And then now we're just getting into where our shear walls are compared to where the rest of the mass timber is to strengthen our building. Since the mass timber is kind of a very monolithic linear system, we're just using it to show how we're transferring the loads from the floors to the walls and down. So now just looking at the roof plan, we're just showing how the 3-ply CLT floors would stack up. These are just some typical connections on how the system would work and tying it down and just bringing in the CLT with the floors and the slabs.
The CLTs also account for sustainability issues in that they're a renewable resource, as well as it would reduce erection time, having these prefabricated, pre-cut to size, lowering the amount of time that a crane would have to be on site, and also expose workers potentially to falling at risk. So that could be a social sustainability concern that it addresses. For mechanical unit, the main overview for the public space is going to be a VRF, variable refrigerant flow system with ERVs, and then a total automation system that could track things like schedules, calendars, trend logs, alarms, zoning, real time. And then for the suites, they'll have their own separate HVAC system, which would be the typical Magic Pack electric with ERV as well. Electric because we're also incorporating PVs, which we'll get into, and that could help to offset some of the electric. These are our basic zoning for the main floor. So our retail gets their own zone. The corridor lobby space is its own zone. One thing to note is that there's a glass wall separating the main blue is the corridor lobby, and it's separating north to south. So it could have a solar heat gain coefficient, so we'd want to condition them separately. This is your typical upper story floor. Corridors, again, they're their own zone because they're conditioned, they're pressurized. And then the suites, again, are their own. So this is a typical floor corridor reflected ceiling plan / schematic drawing. So we're showing air handling units with, in red, supplying from the VRF refrigerant lines. We're also showing our lights, ERV locations, and that sort of thing. And then also the sprinklers are also being shown here as well. This is our typical suite layout. And then this is going to be our site plumbing system. So this is showing a site water retention and reclamation strategy, where all rainwater will be collected collected on site go to a cistern where there'll be a separate gray water reuse strategy coming it back into the building for gray water use. This is our roof. The upper roof, it's two-tier system. So the upper roof has our PVs. Lower roof has got our HVAC units as well as outdoor space for the occupants. This is our renewable energy calculation for the PV. We estimate roughly 220,000 kilowatt hour per year. Oh, and then we also had the rainfall calculation there. But, it's on there.
Just kind of showing that when we did our analysis, we got a 30% window to wall ratio. So we're below the standard of 40%. And getting into the details, we're just showing how our parapet condition and the flooring conditions would work with having the insulation on the outside of the mass timber, and the equitone panels would tie into it, just to make sure that we have a consistent thermal break between the panels and our structural system of the interior.
These are our effective insulation calculations for our different envelope types. So we have two different exterior envelope wall types there with our effective calculations, noting that they all meet ASHRAE 189.1. So 23 is the wall type on the left. Yep. The 189.1 effective, our value is 21.74. And then on the right is our mass wall. So that is a different category in ASHRAE. So that estimate, I believe it's 13. And we make it 19. Our proposed is 19. So, this is our roof on the left. So we're at 48. The effective R value for above deck by ASHRAE standards is 34. And then there was exposed flooring. So this is located in a couple of different areas. If there's a cantilever on the grade, there'd be an exposed floor, as well as between the main floor and the garage level below. We think that is an exposed floor as well because it's unconditioned garage space. However, it's a buffered space where we couldn't find anything that would allow us to have some sort of variance there. So we're considering that an exposed floor system. So that would have insulation on top of the deck. This is our results from our building energy analysis. So the chart there basically shows our baseline value, which would be our typical default values from Green Building Studio. They represent what a typical building would, the US National Building Code, circa 2010. From there, we move in and we added our insulation values that are ASHRAE 189. So that drops it down beneath the ASHRAE 90.1 value. From there, but that still has the default HVAC system. So from there, then we updated our HVAC system to be a heat pump system in Green Building Studio, which we think most accurately reflects our system. And then that brings it down further. And then from there, we incorporate the PV panels as well. So that brings us to about a 52% increase in energy efficiency over the ASHRAE 90.1 standard.
And that's it. Thank you for your time.
Why all that rainy day?
Honestly, we just wanted to catch the building
and all the.
You haven't lived here long enough.
Oh, okay.
Wait, does our presentation?
They did that during that Sunday, Monday rainstorm
Pretty much. We had some inspiration
that we had last week. Thank you.
So I definitely appreciate, I guess, the amount of research that's very evident in your presentation and the sort of look at not just the sort of existing historical context, but also the proposed new plan for Brush Park A and B parcels. So I think you guys picked up on a lot of things and showed, how they could be incorporated. One of the things that in a couple of the projects has stuck out to me is these horizontal windows. Like, I don't know where they're coming from. Even when you look at Ransom Gillis and the other precedent building, I mean, they're vertical oriented openings that are beautiful, and there's just something about these like horizontally oriented windows that are not fitting the context of what I think this neighborhood, the direction it's headed in, even with the new buildings. If you look at the new buildings and how they show fenestration. So I think that would be something important to look at. I also think, you know, the LOHA buildings that you showed talk a lot about community space and sort of these shared outdoor open spaces. And so when you first started and you said, oh, we're going to have these roof terraces, but we're going to put mechanical equipment on them, I was kind of like, what? So my first thought was like, but then at the very end, you were like, oh, and for the use of occupants, but it was kind of like an afterthought. And maybe there was a point in which you realized the mechanical was only going to take up so much space, and so you could use the roofs for program, but then you kind of put all this effort into this like atrium community space that's like in the knuckle. And I just think there's like a little bit of a missed opportunity with these, like, yeah, like those two rooftop spaces. And maybe that instead of having a community room on each floor, a community room could have been paired with one of these outdoor spaces, so that you could have people exercising in the winter, but they're like looking out over some nice shrubbery that you would put up there.
Too good to be out. Mechanical space.
Right. And like maybe you could still have some mechanical, but maybe that goes on the upper roof. Okay. Or maybe it's screened, or I don't know. But it just seemed like, especially when you looked at those precedent buildings, and like, it just kind of tells me that you looked at the precedent buildings, but like maybe didn't fully understand what LOHA was doing with those forms and with those shapes. Like you created some similarities, but then kind of missed the programmatic cues of like what to do with those spaces. So those are the two main things. I also thought it was kind of odd that just from an architectural standpoint, the building sort of cantilevers out over, not cantilevers, but like the ground floor sort of tucks in under the building and the columns come down and you kind of walk between the columns and the facade on the streetscape. And I thought, you know, there was one rendering of the streetscape that you did. Yeah. So this was interesting, and I thought, oh, maybe that's where you enter the building. So like the form of the building is providing a canopy for entering. But then I saw that little door and I was like, oh, it missed the canopy.
So that would be the entrance for the apartment suites, that the doors that you see.
Right.
And then the retail is fully covered.
See, that's totally like opposite to me. Like I think the retail needs to be visible from the street. Think about like where, if you're that car and you're driving, you can't see that retail. You have no idea that there's retail there because the signage, where's the signage? Like we have this discussion a lot because retail is so important to like activating the streetscape, and you've tucked it like under like 15, not even just like 5 feet under the building, but like 15 feet under the building. So to me, like the lobby entrance could have been maybe under that space because you're creating this canopy with the form, but then the retail really needs to be on this side of the rendering, on the right side of the rendering. Granted, I don't remember what your floor plan looks like, but you guys kind of get what I'm saying. I mean, it just seems like another moment where the building created a form, but then the programming isn't responding to that form.
I personally appreciate the energy analysis results because you walk through the breakdown and option by option how you achieve those last percentages. Usually some people just presented with a bam, this is like 30%, we did it, but that sometimes it just doesn't get to us. So like we did HVAC, some percentages, and then after all with the PV, then we could achieve 50%. So it's a nice way of presenting it. So even when you go to your client and talk with the people, it's a lot more effective way, and then you can actually bring them into those analysis. So I appreciate it. And can you go back to HVAC system? Just the single unit part here. Also like the specific zoning part. It's nice. I think it's great. And yeah, right here. Is there any specific way that you locate that terminal unit all the way to the wall side?
It has to be on the right hand side. The duct.
Why we put it over here? Or
No, not that one. The red one and the green boxes.
Okay, so the red are the supply.
Yeah.
And the idea for the supply running along.
Yeah. I mean, I was just wondering that like you locate that to the end of the part so that you have a better circulation, or I cannot recall correctly, but if you locate it in the near the window side, you can have like some sort of pros and cons by the radiation so that you have a heat or sometimes it gets cold. So I was wondering if you consider that one as well. Just a question. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. There's we wanted to put supply ducts in front of the windows, as well as to get the supply into the washroom. We wanted to run that duct along the wall so it wasn't, maybe cutting the space. So it kind of moves it off to one side of the.
So I think
and then the return is the return is directly into the.
Is your ductwork exposed?
Yes.
We talked about the notion of like softening down possibly where you have ductwork. And so they've kind of put it at the perimeter. So as you can see, they're not cutting in the ceiling height in the main space. Maybe if I'm wrong, but I think that was the discussion.
It's just a minor thing also, and the bathroom, it's too close. Bring the red box to higher.
Too close to the exhaust.
Yeah, too close to the exhaust. Okay.
I would say I think that the presentation organization was very well done. Graphics, information, the flow of information, the logic behind how you explain the material. You hit all the marks for bioclimatic. You hit all the marks for envelope. You hit all the marks for structure. You've hit all the marks for the systems in the sense integration that I can see at this point. So all of that's, I think a very strong point of the project. One thing I guess maybe I think about is my wife and I, when we're driving down past the St. John's Hospital out in Novi, and it has these dark gray kind of black Trespa panels on it. And my wife looks over and she doesn't comment on architecture that much, but she looks over to the left and says, "God, who did that? That looks terrible." And it's like you'd be a place you die. So if we can go to your renderings for a minute. Now I'm going.
Boy, you just teed up the ball real high and took out your driver, Dan.
There we go. So the point would be, you might want to rethink the coloration and the darkness of those panels. I mean, I do want to go back to the question of what belongs in this neighborhood, and it's really dark. It's kind of ominous. I think maybe it's a small point. I think you do need to think about that. The last point is, can you show me a floor plan like on the second floor or something? I think that the fact that you stepped back from that historic building over there is a great idea. And one thing I would think about is, I know when you get to the fifth floor, you kind of carve out these spaces because you didn't need units, right? Somehow, it seems to me it'd be interesting to think about how we could have developed maybe a cutout at the second floor and a cutout at the fifth floor, so that, because if I wanted to stay out on some sort of a patio area or something and look out, I think that's the great place to look, and this way is the great place to look. I don't think looking that way is really the view I would want. So my point would be, and there's no quick fix here, so don't even think about it. I mean, it would be to think about, how do I capture that viewpoint? I think from the standpoint of outside space, terraces or cutouts, that would be my suggestion. That and the coloration. But other than that, I think the window fenestration issue is valid because it doesn't suggest a residential expression. It suggests more commercial office. Again, it could be just a question of how you develop that window, changing that window a bit to get it more vertical, to suggest more of a residential.
I honestly just worry, like, this is a comment for everybody, but I honestly worry that, like, somehow Revit defaults to some weird horizontal window and everyone just started putting windows in, and then they're like, oh, maybe they should be a little bigger, but they just proportionally got bigger and wider. Like, Please tell me that's not how this happened, because everybody has horizontal windows
You're the,
in their project.
You're the lead Revit person in our office, so you would know the answer to that.
I don't know. I don't know what default Revit gives you, but it just, based on the 4 projects we've seen, like, where is this coming from?
And then
Sorry.
The last comment I forgot was that you guys talked about the corner, right?
Yes.
And I know I shared with you some notions of screening and different cladding conditions for the corner. I just think that this basically is the same as every other corner. Doesn't mean that that's been recognized or celebrated to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It looks like it's the same. This corner is the same as that, and that, and that. So I think somehow you lost that, and I know we've talked about it. And I think there are some easy ways to deal with it. It's just like some of the cladding solutions I shared with you. You know, maybe you and element all the way up vertically with something. You saw the Lawrence Scarpa projects, right? Where he pushes that whole cladding, that sort of element to the outside. That's what I would have done at that corner to capture that turret, which was the idea that you talked about earlier. But to do it in the modern language, right? So anyway, I think really good work, efforts overall. I thought, my view of the technical side.
Yeah, you guys really did hit all of the items on the menu, right? I mean, you guys really were copious and thorough about making sure that you covered the material that this course intended all of you to confront and wrestle to the ground. So I really appreciate this. It also is really important material, and it didn't seem the least bit boring to you. It didn't seem mundane, or it didn't seem like it was beneath you. You guys kind of relished in everything from egress travel path distances to dew point analyses, right? To, you know, the way that we can even treat the lower level parking as something that's got natural light and ventilation in it with a groundscape planter invention. So I feel real good about this presentation. I feel real good about the slide deck. I feel real good about how strong the package is that you all have pulled together. Here's kind of the thing though, right? Like, this would be a really good schematic set in any office. And then you would go into design development, and then like you guys would spend a whole week just analyzing the proportions of the windows and not just studying them as a figure ground, but looking at actual window products and making sure that what you're drawing is relational to the product, but that the product is also relational to the building enclosure. And so that when you look at a Pella window, for example, it's going to have a different appearance on the facade, right, than, say, you know, Eagle windows or Weather Shield windows, just for an example. And you'll go through a whole series of iterations just for the facade. So I think there's like still room for all of this to improve. That's all I'm saying. I think the grill work too for the Magic Packs is another opportunity. I think those guardrails is another opportunity. You know, we talked a lot about that. I actually like the dark color, but it is my house is black, for example. I have a black house.
That's why you like
with white windows. But so it's a really cool palette, but it's also a palette that you have to be very careful with, because it has sort of an aesthetic connotation that does produce that kind of scary or frightening kind of sort of vibe. So you have to be mindful of that. So you have to be really strategic about it. But even the way that you approach color and texture is something that you would do more iterations of. So even though you guys crossed the finish line and you know you have reason to celebrate and it's a really, really solid project, I want you to know that a project like this now goes through a whole series of like deeper dives into everything, into every aspect, so that it is a project that then works for this community, works for the budget, works for the schedule, and works for the user. So, you know, it's kind of like overwhelming at one moment, but you guys I think are in a good place to do one of these again, right? And I think that's really kind of the goal of a class like this, to get you all oriented to the complexities of a mixed-use building in a historically charged context, and make sure that you solve everything. And you guys have done that, and it's really a lovely job. I really, the graphics are tremendous. They're very clear. You could teach any one of these aspects with your drawings. So I think that's something that you should embrace. And I also love how the renderings are kind of like at moments throughout the slide deck, so that you're reminded that all of this has something to do with the architecture, right? And that you're telling us the story of the architecture as we move through the sort of meatier material, right? So kudos to you guys for that.
Yeah, I guess one other comment would be that if I, going back to the things that could work on, I think the open space at grade level is not that developed yet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it looks like it just wasn't a place where you want to put your time. Right? And it could be something, but
right.
it
I think maybe
more
a real sensitivity to like plant materials and creating kind of a microclimate out there for people to go to and enjoy would be nice.
Yeah. I think I shared with you some open space concepts for residential at one point. Just think about, okay, you're a senior. What are you going to do when you go down to that open space? Where are they going to go? What is going to make it a place that they want to go to?
It's mostly going to be the dog pissing area.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Lots of poodles and
that's what it's going to be, is like everyone's
Bichon Frises,
their dog.
right? All right, thanks guys.
Thank you.
Okay, so that wraps up the fourth presentation. We'll be back on Thursday night, same time, same place, and we'll see 3 more presentations. But before I pledge that, I want to thank Caitlin Hill and Jason Young from our faculty for being here today. The comments were excellent, and if you have anything you can leave with me now, I'll take them. Thank you. And we will share these back with the team members. And then let's see. Dan, thank you for making another long day out of this. I appreciate you for being here. I don't think we have anything else. No? Sounds good. Okay, see you guys on Thursday. Bye for now.